You know what it is? I love it.
Let's have a really practical talk about asceticism. Asceticism means self-denial. It means giving up something. It means abstinence of something. Our silence can be an asceticism because we're giving up all these worldly distractions. That's probably the mildest form. Our voluntary poverty is an asceticism because you're giving up a lot of comforts that you would like to have. And then the most overt kind of, I guess, hardcore form would be like fasting, right? Any ideas or questions so far? No. All right. So what's the point of this, right? This is a tool to gain in self-knowledge. It's a tool to get something, grow in the spiritual life, but it can't be thought of as an achievement, and it can't be thought of as an end in of itself. It's like, oh, now I possess asceticism. It just doesn't make any sense. I possess the virtue of asceticism. It doesn't make any sense to say that, right? But we're doing that all the time. And even when we'll teach our high school youth groups, we'll have them fast for a day. It's like, let's run a marathon, It's like, well, it's just not an end like that. And it's not meant to, one of the things we need to talk about when we talk about trip-ups is, it is meant to grow you in your willpower, grow you in your free will, grow you in your ability to deny your passions. But that's a little bit of a two-edged sword. It's good to have more willpower, but that can easily trip you up with pride and other problems. What it's kind of more supposed to do is it's supposed to humble you, and bring you more into this right relationship with God through humility. So it's kind of like this. It's like, in a normal fast, I almost feel like there's three people, right? There's the person who's kind of wimpy, there's the medium person, and there's the person who's super hard-headed and strong, right? Let's talk about the normal person for a second. The normal person in a fast will fast for, not eating anything when they get up. The typical monastic fast, as established by the Desert Fathers, was you'd just get up in the morning and not eat anything until the 9th hour, right? And the 9th hour, you'd have a reasonable meal and not eat anything until the next day at the 9th hour. And they kind of would fast every single day like this. And what would happen is about 6 hours, and the 9th hour is usually 3 o'clock, because I usually got up at 6. So what usually happens is sometime around noon, you get distressed and you get upset and you get, what's the point? Why am I here? The noonday devil is what they would sometimes call it. It also is another name for despair, would kind of come into the room and start bothering you. And it's like a storm you have to weather. And then as you come out of this storm of kind of this mess, you get this other thing that comes about, which is this yearning. It's like the natural reaction to wanting food. It's just I want. It's probably what kept cavemen from starving to death, is because they got really driven after so much hunger that they had to go do something, and they were wanting something, and this idea comes upon them, right? So what is the point of this fast? Is the point to just deny that yearning? No, the point is to take that yearning and that distress and center it on God, right? So that yearning, that I want, you go, I want God, I will love God, I love God, I love God. You take this when we eat enough and we're satisfied, we lose yearning. We lose our desire is not burning as hot because we're just happy. We're just hey, I'm satisfied. I feel good, right? But it's this fasting that reawakens that, desire. There's one of the Desert Father stories where a monk comes to one of the great abbas and he says, I've done this, I've lived in my cell, he'd done all these achievements that were, kind of the great achievements of a desert monk, staying in your cell, not talking to anyone for a year, doing all these different things, right? And he says, what left have I to in a sense, achieve, right? And the Abba lifts his hands up in the air, and all his hands turn to fire, and he says, burn like this. Like the whole point of everything, all the hoops this guy was jumping through, because they're just hoops at the end of the day, was to burn with desire and put that desire, in a sense, on God, right? So it's like your food desire, you're kind of putting it on God. And this is an interesting thing, and it creates a pretty urgent type of prayer. As a side note to that, you're throwing in a lot of free will, and that when you have problems in the future, you feel more free to just deny your desires, right? Mm-hmm. The other thing that the old desert monks who kind of established this type of fasting would do is they'd often be vegetarian. A lot of people today worry. I kind of like always pay attention to this just as like a sidebar issue, like whenever like CNN or Yahoo News or whatever wants to put a little story about dieting or whatever. There's a whole group of people who say that it's totally unhealthy for you to deny yourself food. There's another group of people who say it's the most healthy thing in the world to deny yourself food, right? You're going to find people who tell you it's the worst thing to do, and if you want to believe them, you'll just never fast, I think the general truth is that these desert monks were way outliving their contemporaries in Egypt at the time. Maybe it was because they were remote and they just had less disease out in the desert, or maybe it was because this diet they were doing was just not that harmful. I think that also through this you gain some self-knowledge that might be kind of basic, like how does eating sugar affect me? How does caffeine affect me? How does eating a big fatty meal affect me? How does, it's almost like when I think almost everyone in our society knows that if they go through a period of working out a lot and they eat McDonald's, they feel yucky. Other people who are eating McDonald's every day don't even realize how yucky they feel sometimes. And I think that there's something in this whole kind of like fasting experiment that like teaches you a lot about how you feel when you eat certain ways and things like this. That's a very natural result, but one of the things the Desert Fathers were really against was any fast longer than the 9 hours. Like if somebody came to them and said, I've been fasting for 3 days and I haven't eaten, they'd be like, you're stupid, go back and eat. Because you kind of you get diminishing returns to this at a certain point. Like if you're doing this for a spiritual reason, there's a point where you're just not getting the spiritual return, right? So fasting for a Christian purpose is usually a 9-hour fast. Here are some things to know. You will never do a piece of Christian asceticism that damages the body, right? Some of the saints have been accused of this. Some of the saints have repented of doing that type of thing. But no authentic piece of Christian asceticism will make you less healthy. There's a problem of pride / toughness that can happen, which is the same thing that, like I said, I tried to say that there's like the wimpy person, the normal person, and the super tough person. The wimpy person, fasting is like immediately effectual for. Like if your whole point is to know your dependence on God, you give something up, you're wimpy, you know your dependence on God right away. Right? A normal person is prideful somewhat, and it takes a while before your dependence upon God becomes so obvious. There's another type of person who's just a very emotionally, intellectually strong person, and fasting can be very weird because they just can have the talent to do it, and instead of letting it humble them, they're just doing it like an athlete might do something. It's just another accomplishment or feather in their hat, and this can be a tricky situation, and I don't really know what to say about it. I mean, I think that we all should be getting a little bit stronger through things like asceticism, living without AC and stuff like that, right? But it can never become the point, right? Or we've done something wrong. Or we have some wrong attitude. There was an issue. The other thing is just to know that these are hoops, There was an issue that sometimes what we do is we come up in our mind, not from Scripture, not from, the fathers of the church, just come up in our mind some idea of like what we should be doing, and then we just inflict it without looking at the cost and the results and everything. And early on in Simple House, me and a buddy were like, let's fast all of Lent, and this is what we'll eat, and this is how we're going to do it, right? And we were being such jerks to each other, and it was like hurting our community and hurting our situation, that it was just like, after about 2 weeks in, I was just like, this is just not of God. You know what I mean? Like, forget this, right? And we had like kind of a conflict over it, because it was like, clearly you could just agree that the fruits of this fast were not good, but at the same time, he wasn't willing to like not do it, because I don't know why. It was clearly not achieving our end. The hoop was not serving its purpose. We tried it for 2 weeks, and we were hurting each other, and not being more Christian because of it. So I think that, asceticism should be judgeable like this. I've noticed in our ministry is that if I'm not eating, and it's like, say I'm trying to do the monastic fast and eat at about 3:00. If I'm doing ministry, if I'm working on the house, not a big deal. If I'm hanging out with you guys is usually not a big deal. But if I'm supposed to be out there meeting people, greeting people, working with families, they start being like, something wrong? Are you okay? Something wrong? And I'm like, yeah, I'm okay. And I might be okay, right? But I'm just looking more and more and more grim. And it's just not a really good ministry mode to be in, So I just noticed that like fasting during, when you're supposed to be doing interrelational ministry is just not super positive, Another thing is that it's good whenever you're doing a type of asceticism to have, it's good to step back and evaluate whether or not what you're doing makes sense. What doesn't work, though, is to evaluate in the middle of it. To say, I'm going to fast, and then you say, maybe I'll do it all day, maybe not, whatever. And then like an hour in, you're like, oh, should I eat now? Next hour, should I eat now? Should I break my fast now? Next hour, and you just kind of get in this obsession of like, should I break my fast now, or now, or now, or now, or now, or now? And all you're doing in the middle of your fast is not praying more, it's not putting all that yearning on God. You just keep reevaluating the question of when you're supposed to eat and how you're going to do it, And it's a lot more freeing, and it works better as an ascesis if you're just like, I don't, I'm trying to think of a corollary that wouldn't be fasting, like if you decide you're only going to use Facebook, like it might be good to just say, I'm going to use, if you have a problem with Facebook, I'm going to use Facebook half an hour a day, and then just do half an hour. Don't always be reevaluating, well, should I do it now, or should I, quit now, or is today really a good day for 45 minutes, should I do 15 minutes 3 times today, or whatever, Just to create the rule and follow the rule will give you more freedom in the whole experience.